Vice Prime Minister's Kurdish debate.
Here, here.
Should I use the mic? Should I use the mic?
Yes. Yes.
Very simply, we need to be very clear in this room. What exactly is this secret deal? The secret deal is was brokered between a local Iraqi official with ISIS militants within Raqqa. What does this deal entail? It allows ISIS fighters and their families to escape Raqqa, taking via convoy trucks, so they're able to get out of Raqqa before the imminent destruction of the ISIS forces within Raqqa. However, we feel that it's extremely problematic in two senses in this regard. Number one, the convoy trucks did not essentially check whether or not these individuals have weapons within them or not. They were able to escape these areas without being able to be de-weaponized in this regard. But number two, it was done between the Iraqi local officials and not essentially in agreement within the international alliance. We feel that's extremely problematic. What am I going to talk about in my speech in terms of arguments? My main point of contention is the fact that this will just, in the end, worsen the war against ISIS on two levels. The first will be focusing on dealing in regards to why exactly is it problematic for the local Iraqi officials to broker this deal. Let's understand this very clearly. This deal was never brokered with the agreement of the international alliance. We need to understand the international alliance includes forces from UK, Europe, as well as the United States, Syria, as well as the Kurdish forces. But at no point was it stated that this deal was agreed by them. It was only stated that this deal was only agreed by the local Iraqi officials, for pushing them out of Raqqa before they are able to meet their undeniable demise. Why exactly is this problematic? Because number one, especially regarding the placement of ISIS that they focus on within Iraq and Syria, we feel that the ability for you to trust Iraqi officials as well in the future is something that is completely diminished. Why exactly is this problematic? Number one, we need to understand that cooperation is absolutely necessary when dealing with terrorist groups within a particular nation. Because of the fact that they are a threat, we cannot allow these kinds of governments or officials within these governments to cooperate with these kinds of terrorist groups. Because it's extremely problematic and extremely harmful to allow them to continue to prosper within these kinds of countries. Moreover, right, we need to understand that now it displays an image that you actually do care for these kinds of terrorists, which is extremely problematic for the international community to have. Why exactly in the end will be far more problematic? Because through the impacts of brokering this deal, Iraq places itself in a situation where future handlings of ISIS, whether it's inside Iraq or neighboring Iraq, will be extremely hard for them. They are incapable of providing any kinds of insight towards it. No one is willing to trust the kind of backing or kind of information that they have, as well as the kind of forces and decisions that they're trying to make. They're placed in a situation where they are always seen as individuals or complicit of the escape of ISIS, and they being able to travel around to different kinds of countries. The second impact, which is far more problematic as well, is the fact that the ISIS forces left via convoy trucks towards other different kinds of countries. Now, why exactly is this problematic, right? Within those convoy trucks that they were being escorted out of the country, they had loads of weaponry from ranging from semi-automatic rifles to RPGs to God knows what. It's ISIS, right? We need to understand that also includes bombs within the families, because if they were to ever be caught, then they can just blow themselves up. So it's a means of a safety for them. Why exactly is this problematic? Number one, they're being sent out towards countries neighboring of ISIS, to even points of countries that includes as far as Turkey. And it's extremely problematic here because we need to understand that they can set up conservative circles as well as splinter groups within these particular countries, being able to set up, bring up more forces to be able to radicalize individuals within the neighboring areas, as well as continue the cause of what ISIS is trying to fight for. It's actually problematic in this regard, because this means that the fight for ISIS will be continually out. The fight has been stretched out to different kinds of countries, not only being and Syria. This is a very this is actually problematic because that means that the international forces are not placed in a situation where they have to move out towards, 1 second, yeah. This will have to be stretched out their resources towards different kinds of nations and makes it very hard because these kinds of communities and circles are actually hidden, and it's very hard. It's actually hard to find these kinds of places. And through that, the kind of problem here is that in the end of the day, the problem here is that the abundant rise and being able to garner more forces is something that cannot be detained and something that will continuously happen. Yeah.
Considering the fact that in the past, the power of ISIS came into the fact that they were once centralized. How then do they have the ability to further proliferate once they're decentralized under the fall of the deal?
Simple. The different forces go to different kinds of areas. Once forces are implanted within those specific areas, they will grow and multiply because they're able to garner people who also sympathize with their cause. That's how the fight will become far more worse because now you have multiple different anthills everywhere within the world that are going to generate the kind of forces that will go against the world and will go and continue to fight against ISIS. Why do we feel that the comparative is far worse? Because we need to understand that if this deal actually never happened, right? Sure, a lot of people are gonna die, right? But at the very least, we need to understand that we would have killed the individuals within Raqqa. We would have taken them away. We would have destroyed them. We would not allow them to create more splinter groups and social and circles within other kinds of countries. We were about to win the war anyway. So what's the point of allowing them to get out? We don't feel like that kind of trade-off is something that we're willing to take. In the end of the day, we need to understand this. It was a very poor decision to allow the local officials to make in this regard. It didn't benefit them, it didn't benefit the fight against ISIS. We feel that it's actually really childish and we do not want to allow this to stand.
I thank the Prime Minister for that speech, and now I'd like to invite the Leader of Opposition. You're here.
Wait.
Pass the mic over.
Pass the field mic over to the
Do you have two? You have another one there. Sorry. Oh, you're using one.
Yeah.
Bottom red.
There's mute and then there's turn off. Don't turn it off, just mute if you don't want.
Atas.
We tell you the debate is not only about fighting ISIS, the war against ISIS. We tell you that the debate also takes place in which how a Syrian government also best caters towards its citizens and what's best for Syria. But first, let's deal with side government, right? We tell you that most of their argumentation is also clashed within our arguments, but let's deal with certain things that came out, right? Number one, they wanted to talk about how they wanted to devalue the steps of the Syrian government brokering these secret deals just because it wasn't in consensus with international alliances such as the UK and Europe. We tell you that this is very value neutral matter, right? But because they just wanted to say it's an illegitimate choice because it wasn't consensus without actually providing any analysis on how even if they were in consensus, what benefit would come out of that. But secondly, we tell you that he wanted to talk about how they would least handle information better and make best decisions. We tell you that's not true because when they make these kind of decisions, we tell you that ISIS fighters, right? And that will be because our burden is to only prove that the secret deal is what's best for Syria, and it's a legitimate choice for them to make. And the policy and parameters of this debate is not only about like probabilities of fighting ISIS, right? In which we will prove that as well later. But second, also about how Syria should rebuild after the siege of Raqqa. So what I'm going to tell you today, number one, the argument of like what governments should do. So there are 3 levels to this. Number one, role of Syrian government in the transition from war. Number two, who are these people who fought in the war? And number 3, what is the next step for Syria? So the Syrian Democratic Force, right? We tell you that they are the ones who are handling the situation currently. Number one, they should fix the displacement of citizens within Raqqa. Why is that so? We tell you that the situation now is that millions and millions of citizens are pushed out from these nations, right? These thousands of families and children who fought against ISIS are now outside of the border and also in camps within the north, right? So, not yet, I just started. So, secondly, so why is this important for governments to do this, right? We tell you that because these individuals are most affected within these kind of situations, because these are the individuals whose rights not only been abused, but also are involved within the fighting against ISIS, right? Because they were forced to defend themselves within the war. And we tell you that these individuals weren't individuals who entitled themselves to the job of being soldiers, right? We tell you this is normal citizens within the city of Raqqa. We tell you that these individuals currently are within the north in the camps and either also in foreign land illegally, right? We tell you that these individuals are living like refugees banished from their own land. We tell you it's important for governments to grant them the protection because they by moving them back into the city, right? So we tell you that it's a legitimate choice for a moral and rational government to do. But secondly, the people who are involved in this war, and this is where I show my outcomes through this policy, right? These people are the ones who fought in the front line, where they had their weapons against their heads and fighting for their lives, right? We tell you that these normal citizens who weren't trained to the best of extents, right? We tell you that these people are also deserve to have their families back together with them, but most importantly, right, these are the people who are most politically involved within this kind of conflicts, not now. And we tell you that not only they are most politically involved, but we can prove to you that they are the most informed individuals on the ground about the conflict and the destruction that happens within these nations, right? So we tell you that once you unify the people in Raqqa, we tell you that then the government is able to make policies on how to rebuild the siege, rebuild after the conflicts, right? We tell you that these individuals, because of the fact that they are well informed of the destruction and experience firsthand of what was destroyed within these conflicts, we tell you that this coalition with all the citizens is best in order for them to further progress, right? We tell you that the prioritization of what they should be fixing first, for example, rebuilding homes and rebuilding the community, is when Syria that actually becomes a politically stable Syria. Secondly, we also say that because of the fact that they are united, we tell you there is no influence from Syria, which means that these citizens are no longer vulnerable and fearful to progress and protect their own nation. But yeah, sure.
Firstly, it's Iraq, not Syria. But secondly, why is it fair for a country to decide to provide escape towards these kinds of Iraqi forces towards other countries?
Sorry?
Why is it okay for a government to send their problem towards another country?
The problem of the people to move back in the country so that they can make better policies? I don't get what you're saying. So the conclusion to this argument, right, is we should rebuild Raqqa and it should be the priority of the governments, right? So secondly, the argument of recapturing ISIS. So number one, this directly clashes with whatever Hazim want to talk about, how suicide belts and so on and so forth. Number one, how does these convoys occur? We tell you that these convoys have 50 trucks, right? All the ISIS fighters and their families have suicide belts within these trucks, right? So as a preventive measure if anyone wanted to cut off the deal. So we tell you that these Iraqi officials, within these kind of processes, they watch via air, right? They track the movements of these ISIS fighters. We tell you that even in status quo right now, within the process of them moving out of Raqqa, Iraqi officials have taken the incentive to bomb these convoys and track their movement while they're at it, right? Step by step, they're taking the ISIS fighters and having the upper hand within this kind of recapturing, right? So we tell you that even after they recapture these fighters, they release the profiles of these fighters, right? For example, they release the profile of Musa, who was the who was their official, right? Who was a high-profile ISIS fighter who helped organize their strategies within war. We tell you that as you actually recapture them in an individual unit, it's number one, not only easier, but secondly, more profitable for you, right? Why is that so? Because we tell you that terrorist organizations are often stronger when they are together, right? When you take in this profile, you make a world the better place, because these ISIS fighters movement as a movement is already destabilized. So if you want a better world, go with side opposition.
I thank the Leader of Opposition for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister. I would ask the speakers not hold the mic directly to their mouths, because this is really loud. Thank you. Deputy Prime Minister, whenever you're ready.
I think it's easy for Adin to come up here and talk to you about government responsibility without really analyzing the comparatives between the choices that governments choose to make, how it strategically impacts, right? I don't think she responded to what Haziq wanted to come up here and talk to you in today's debate. Firstly, what do we come up here from opening and talk to you about, right? We talked to you at the point at which when Iraqi officials negotiated forces locally and then the international community wasn't involved within these discussions. We think it's extremely harmful in these circumstances because you lose the support. She chose to respond to this by telling us it's simply a principle of consensus. I don't think so. I think when you lose support, you structurally lose the amount of troops that can enter. You structurally lose the amount of support that the community wants to have towards giving money towards these areas, right? Or giving troops in these circumstances, right? And the point is we recognize it's more than just a principle, because we are only strong and the only reasons we're able to go and succeed in taking out of ISIS is because of the international community's support and communalization of the international community. I think you fall for that principle. I don't think there's a response for what Haziq spent a predominant amount of speech talking about. Secondly, we also talked to you about how when you leave with weapons, where these communities were allowed to leave with a large amount of weapons, these people are able to start splinter groups. What response do we have from this? We didn't really have a straight up principal attack. Instead, we had two subverting attacks. Firstly, they talked to us about tracking the movement of ISIS. In fact, they didn't explain this argumentation. I'm going to tell you why it's factually false. But even if, I'm going to show you why, especially when you have splinter groups within these circumstances, it's worse than, for example, you have a very concentrated area of troops. Firstly, let's deal with their argumentation. They told us that they're going to track these convoys. I don't think that's true. In the BBPC article, it literally was the only reason they found out that these people actually left the cities and how these people left the cities along with the routes was because your truck convoys of the people who wanted, the people who drove these ISIS forces are the ones that told you, right? I don't think these bombings are accurate because then you wouldn't have anyone to tell you the truth about these circumstances. Firstly. Secondly, we recognize that there was no tracking of these troops. These individuals knew who was leaving these areas, right? So I don't think the release of information is one that's essentially important, right? You already knew who are the leading officials within these circumstances. I don't understand what information you got from this tracking of your troops in these areas. I don't think there's a sufficient explaining from the, I know. But lastly, they told us how they're going to be able to capture these individuals. I tell you no. I tell you, when you're able to have splinter groups, what does this mean? This means tactically as ISIS, you're no longer centralized in getting land, but you're able to have guerrilla warfare, or actively have guerrilla warfare tactics, right? That means you're able to take your weapons and your suicide bombs and start attacking government states in these circumstances, so attacking individuals within different areas. I would say some splinter groups would do that, right? Attack your cities, hurt your citizens even more. But more importantly, some individuals who are able to rally support of other extremists within different cities are able to take over that cities too, right? That means we can see another Raqqa splitting up somewhere within Syria or somewhere within Turkey, right, in these circumstances. We recognize that the harm of this is extremely harmful because you're unable to be able to track these individuals or be able to take out the war. The comparative was simple for Hazim's speech, right? And the point is, when these individuals were staying within this area, so static within these groups, then we had an army going into these circumstances and wars fighting out. The only reasons why we take them out is because they didn't want the suffering to continue. I say, as long as the suffering were to continue for 2 or 3 more months or a year, as long as we're able to capture the individuals who have caused the sufferings, then the lives of our militaries that has fallen because of this war is one that's just, right? Because we bring benefits within these circumstances. Closing, I'll take you if you have one, right?
When the current harms of ISIS are exacerbated by centralization...
I can't hear you.
I'll use the mic. When centralization
Wow.
Centralization under status quo is already exacerbating the harms of ISIS, how is decentralization much worse under your side?
One, I think that decentralization... Wait, pardon, repeat that one more time?
ISIS, under current status quo, functions to its degree that it can because it is centralized. Why is decentralization suddenly so harmful to a terrorist group which has no central leader?
One, I think tactics are able to change in the predominant amount of circumstances. That means when they start splintering out of desperation, they're able to go to guerrilla warfare. But the harmful effect of this is that they are more desperate, right? That means they're more likely to resort to more forms of violence. They're more likely to attack cities more willingly because they're desperate in these circumstances. So your side of the house has individuals that become more extreme. The comparative isn't that centralized forces were strong. We recognize, regardless of what you read in the Infoslide or the BPPC article in itself, these forces were fighting a war for months in these areas, right? That means we were attacking your centralized areas. When it's centralized, we know where your individuals are. We get to block the borders within the circumstances as long as your D wasn't there, right? That means we're able to contain the form of extremism within a particular location. We're able to challenge the narratives within these areas on the majority of circumstances. We're able to contain the harmful extreme narratives to only Raqqa. On your side of the house, your government becomes more harmful because you allow them to spread to the rest of Syria. I think that is the harm that occurs on your side of the house. Furthermore, I think the long-term comparative on our side of the house was that if these individuals were to stay, then I would say your international community may have taken longer to enter the circumstance, enter Raqqa and take over Raqqa, but at least they would have captured Raqqa with the comparative of taking out ISIS, or at least significantly reducing the power that ISIS has in comparison to your side of the house, right? Lastly, what did Hazim want to talk to you about? Lastly, what did they want to talk to you about, right? They talked about the role of governments. Firstly, they told you how we have to fix the citizen-centric space. Firstly, I don't think that's a fair argumentation. The comparative isn't their side of the house suddenly removes ISIS. That means they have more extreme versions of ISIS, just more spread out, right? I think guerrilla warfare will occur in the future. I think we are able to take weapons and start attacking different neighboring cities in order to threaten governments that, look, I'm going to bomb this city at the point in which you don't give me a piece of land, right? This type of narrative start to thrive again. You revitalize the war against ISIS because they get to start over again and create new territories in these circumstances. I think more citizens gets replaced on your side of the house. Secondly, right, I think the SDF, when they entered these circumstances, if you're going to read the Economist articles, right, we recognize that when they came in, they simply hurt these people even more, right? They're more violent in these circumstances. When the people came in, they were discriminated or they were hurt against, right? People who wanted to enter schools and they wanted to talk about, for example, ISIS were actually, excreted from schools and not allowed to enter schools. Parents were killed in the circumstances. Individuals who wanted to start splinter groups within or were to see ISIS sympathizers were attacked in these areas. I recognize that there is a harm that the SDF is occurring. On top of that, your policies aren't really beneficial. I don't see where that's happening in the status quo. Secondly, they talk to us about more informed and somehow or other they have policies to rebuild this. I don't understand why we can't have this in the status in our side of the house, right? It means in long term, when we're able to challenge the narrative, yeah, sure, before 6.
So please engage with us about how recapturing in individual units is better, because he never responded to us.
You cannot recapture individual units. These people are able to escape, go underground, the same way that you see this going on in Colombia when drug lords and drug pins are able to escape and they hide in these circumstances, right? That means they go away from areas and they lead new splinter movements to be able to create extremist factions within different parts of your communities. So they start off within your forests where your army can no longer enter. So all your information has no point. Then they have individuals going in and literally resulting to guerrilla warfare to attack your soldiers. When your soldiers try to chase them back, they fly away. They go back to their home base, right? This is what guerrilla warfare is, right? It's why governments find it really hard to challenge challenge individuals who result into guerrilla warfare. So we recognize that they're able to use bargaining chips. It's the same thing we happened in Colombia, right? Where Pablo Escobar threatened to bomb different cities and different states until the governments were able to let him off the hook or take away the extradition clause, right? And it's very successful in the circumstances where guerrilla warfare and the government is unable to do so. On top of that, governments on your side of the house are even weaker according to Harvard's analysis, right? Because they lack the support of the international community. What is a simple comparative in today's debate? On their side of the house, they have a splintered ISIS group where they lack the information and the ability to track these individuals. Even if they could track these individuals, if some individuals escape, I recognize that guerrilla warfare occurs and that's something that's harmful, and they also have an international community that doesn't support them. On our side of the house, we not only have the support of the international community, but we had the ability for us to take away a centralized ISIS compared to inability to take away any form of ISIS whatsoever. I think the comparison is taken by opening government, never proud of the propose.
Thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech, and now I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Test, okay.
Just make sure the mic is not in your mouth.
Okay.
Thanks,
Came out wrong.
To expand, to endure. These are the mottos of ISIS, and we think the only way we make sure that these individuals of ISIS have a failure of expanding and enduring is by brokering the secret deal, and we think this is best for Syria and Iraq. And this is exactly what Aline told you in her speech. But before I go on to extend the debate and tell you how we better help the world community directly clashing with OG, first let's go on to a few responses towards what Roshan had to say. First thing to say. Number one, he didn't respond at all towards what Aline told you about Raqqa. Right? She told you the importance of governments to be able to secure Raqqa and to secure a better place for these displaced individuals to live in. She told you exactly how we think that we would rather prioritize the safety and the ability for individuals to live a happy life and to be able to go back into the country that they were forced out of. It's much more important than the fight for ISIS, though we think we also take that issue. Second thing to say about Roshan's speech. We think that in response to is it bad for Iraq to act without the consensus of other countries? We say this is perfectly fine, right? Why do we say so? We say this for several reasons. Number one, we say that it's okay for Iraq to act without the consensus of other countries simply because we think that because they're in the better place to understand and be able to know how ISIS operates and how ISIS works inside the country. This is when individuals are our better is the best actor to act and respond to how ISIS acts in the first place. And number two, we think that no, thank you, Roshan, and no, thank you, both of you. We think that number two, we don't think that the backlash from the international community will necessarily happen, right? We think that in the international community, once we see the success of being able to decentralize and break the centerhold we have within ISIS, this is when the international community is more likely to trust within the Iraqi officials because they've been able to prove to us the success of being able to decentralize ISIS and make sure they do not continue proliferating. And secondly, on his whole idea of splinter groups and the proliferation of ISIS, we don't think this necessarily happens, right? Because what have we already told you? We told you how because individuals are more displaced, not only are the head individuals of ISIS more likely to be displaced from the lower ranks of ISIS, we also secondly tell you that these individuals will no longer be able to band together and fight against fight as a whole unit because they're no longer able to discuss with each other or spread their ideas. So we think that one ISIS individual trying to recruit others others is a far less effective method than a bunch of a group of ISIS working to spread their ideas. But before I go on to extending the debate, right? Let's go. Yes, Roshan.
Yeah, firstly, you had about 200 ISIS soldiers leaving. I don't think it's going to be individually one by one. I think it'll be tens of people. Secondly, you can have new followers within new countries because you're able to revitalize the extremist narrative. What happens in those circumstances?
Right.
First thing on 200 ISIS soldiers, we don't say that this always happens, right? We say that in these truck convoys, individuals will be more likely to be spread out, and there are individuals who do spread their ways after being stuck in these convoys, right? So we don't think that not all of them will be stuck as a group in the first place. But even if this were to happen, we don't think that they will have a power of influence as ISIS would have as a central unit anyway. And this directly clashes with the argumentation that I have. How do we better deal with ISIS under our side? Because I'm going to argue to you how the displacement of individuals from Raqqa better decentralizes ISIS. And I have three levels to this. Number one, on how we better create profiling and tracking of ISIS. Because we have to understand that once we have multiple convoys and multiple trucks of individuals being smuggled over multiple borders, this is when we further displace and crack the set of individuals who become ISIS. Because we would argue to you that the very power that makes ISIS so strong is the fact that these individuals have a unifying stance and are able to fight together. So we think that once they're not together, this is when they're less likely to be able to act as a central unit. Secondly, we think that the kind of fighters that we're able to gather don't only have the lower ranking individuals, but we also say that these are bigger positions. No, thank you, Roshan, already took one, and our bigger positions are people who will probably be valuable and tell us crucial information about how ISIS operates, the amount of ammunition they have, and the kind of centers that they are able to work with. Because I already told you the example of Central Intelligence officers who have been caught in the border, and we are able to further imprison them and gain very crucial information from them. Secondly, why is this so good, right? No, thank you. We think that number one, we find better forms of information from these individuals, because now we have these individuals going over borders. No, thank you, like in Turkey, and we have individuals being caught systematically for us to be able to lure information out of them. And secondly, we think we better clamp down on those leaders and destabilize ISIS's power hold. But lastly, what happens next in the world, right? Because directly clashing with OG, they wanted to talk about how international organizations, no thank you, are going to backlash against them. We tell you that once we see the success of this separation of ISIS, this is when international organizations are more likely to put trust in Iraq and better have policies to band together against ISIS. Why do we say so? We say so because these individuals are now seeing the ability for Iraq to band against ISIS and to have a stance towards this. Because we would tell you that the international community has been very complicit in the fight thus far. And lastly, what's the comparative that we bring to you on side 00? Because what will happen in a world where the secret deal wasn't brokered? We would tell you that a few things. Number one, we would tell you that this is a world where it's far less likely for Raqqa to be rebuilt, and a world where Syrians find it much harder to come back after being displaced. We think is very bad. Secondly, we think in a world where we don't broker the secret deal, it's far harder to fight ISIS as they're a complete central unit. So in conclusion, we think that we create a better world because we better split up ISIS, and we better get the world to work together and trust Iraq. Never been prouder to oppose.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that speech. Now to begin the closing half of the debate, I invite the Member of Government. You're here.
Test. Ladies and gentlemen, on our side of the house, if the secret deal wasn't brokered, we could have ended ISIS once and for all. Okay, but before that, going on to the opposition side, okay, they talk about a lot on how like they want to like the somehow far-fetched idea of going to track and bomb the people who escaped from Raqqa, right? Okay, first of all, they've never given us like who are the ones doing this in the current status quo. It's not happening. Second of all, and they talk about how like they want to do this because they want to like capture these people and get crucial info from them. But ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a benefit exclusive on their side. Actually, it's harder on their side because on our side, if the secret deal wasn't brokered, we could have simply stormed the city, captured these people in that city if we didn't let them go, and then like, just got the crucial info from there. I believe this is like a better and more rational way to get crucial info from terrorists than actually like letting them escape, run far away, and then suddenly go to like the trouble of going and capturing them. This is just irrational. But second of all, they talk about how like Iraq knows best on how to stop ISIS, that they have like somehow more of a right and know how better to stop ISIS proliferating. The very fact that ISIS proliferated in their country means that their government wasn't the best and most suited to stop this. And second of all, we see that ISIS isn't just an Iraqi threat, it's a global threat. It threatens the whole community. So like we believe that everyone should have a right and also have the ability to stop this, not just Iraq. Okay, but and lastly, they also talked about in like the leader opposition speech, right, about how somehow all of these citizens of Raqqa, the ones the refugees, are all innocent, uninvolved with the conflict. They didn't want ISIS. Okay, first of all, we question the logic simply because they were in the capital city of ISIS. There were many like other cities that weren't so deeply involved with terrorism, and still they opted to go there. And second of all, we believe that the very fact that they stay in there is that they abet terrorism. They abet terrorists like taking other people's lives, and this is something that we believe is extremely problematic. Okay, but going on, I believe that so coming from their side of the house, the only thing that they managed to prove to the floor today is that they want to let people go just to catch them back again to get crucial info. Why not just take them in the first place? And second of all, and actually basically that's just it. Okay, but going on to our side of the house, we're going to tell you on how like first of all there are two things. The very principle that the principal causes and also the impacts and implications of the secret deal that is so harmful that we shouldn't have done it in the first place. Okay, so going on, we believe looking at the implications, right? I'd like to stand on the fact that the secret deal is basically just letting ISIS live on because everyone knows the impacts of terrorism and its guerrilla warfare, right? And the very fact that when it's like so widespread, we can't just eliminate them on the spot. And like the very fact that terrorists themselves, like they don't stop themselves from taking people's lives because they believe in their own greater good, they actually neglect this. But before that, yes.
Isn't that just a rehash of your opening in number 2? Isn't international alliances coming in and taking them out from the borders just the same as what we're proposing?
Okay, yes, but the very fact, okay, first of all, that's like extremely problematic because I'm pretty sure it's very simple for everyone to understand. The very fact that when you barricade these people in the city and just capture them then and there, it will eliminate the problem of tracking them, which is like so irrational from their side of the house. Okay, and going on, they also talked about how like it's easy. So going on back to the point, right? The repercussions of letting ISIS live on, right? Because what we're trying to say is that first of all, not just like the fact that we're letting them spread their influence. Second of all, we're trying to prove to you that the very fact that a secret deal has been brokered and that we let these people live on is the fact that it shows the whole world today that terrorists can like easily bail out when they think that they're gonna die. That terrorists like will always have a way out, and even if they support terrorism and such. This is like this is extremely problematic to our side of the house because we believe that the very fact, the moment that we let them have a way to escape means it's like extremely like kind of justifying them in the sense that we're letting them live on. These are people who have lost. Okay, because on our side of the house, we believe that ISIS believers and supporters and fighters have lost the right to live the moment they believe that mass murder and terrorism is justified for their own greater good and such. Okay, so going on, so this is why we believe that because if the international community doesn't take a solid stance against terrorism, it's actually just letting terrorism proliferate, not just ISIS but other terrorism groups also. Because when the international community abets these kind of decisions, it's saying that, oh, we're going to let terrorists live anyway, we're going to let them proliferate anyway. It's not putting a final stop to these kind of groups that have like caused major and severe harm to our societies today. ladies and gentlemen, the closing government isn't willing to gamble the lives and futures of thousands of peace-loving families for the lives of a militant few. Because we believe that, for all of the benefits that we've shown you, we've also, we believe that the very fact that when Iraq brokers the deal, it's saying that the international community itself is like, doesn't have a hand in this. It's like giving Iraq free reign to let these people live, just because we're not sure why they did this, but then again we say that we don't care why they did this, because the very fact that when Iraq let these people live is the very fact they were sending the whole community the impression that we're actually letting them proliferate and we're just supporting them. But going on, second of all, the second implication is that it incites other terrorist activities groups to and third of all, on our side of the house, right? Because we want to live in a world where when we have the opportunity to eradicate terrorism from its roots, we do that. Ladies and gentlemen, and on our side of the house, when we have an opportunity to eliminate terrorism, to eliminate all these harms that are coming from, we actually eliminate terrorism from the roots. We stop terrorism from proliferating. We stop it from ever going to happen in the first place. We stop it from ever reviving in the future. And this is the main strength that we have on our side of the house. Well, compared to their only case was the fact that they somehow wanted to go and go back and recapture these terrorists for other crucial info. But before that, I've never been prouder to propose.
I thank the member of government for that speech. Now to begin the case for the closing opposition, I invite the member of all.
Mr. Speaker, we think that side opposition represents a very aggressive, a very kung pao approach towards terrorism, which has led to the inception of terrorism in the first place. We think this approach is very problematic in its being, and is especially problematic considering the continuing defeat of ISIS in recent years. We think when the Prime Minister comes up here and says that even though ISIS is defeated, we should clamp down on them anyway, we shouldn't spare them their lives, we think that's especially problematic in the first place. Today I'll be talking of a few things. I'll be exploring a lot more into the complex of ISIS fighters, and as to why these people deserve, and why these people at very least deserve the mercy that should be treated upon them under the secret deal. I'll make comparisons between the military-industrial complex and the ISIS complex that occurs within Iraq, and besides that, I'll be talking about how, at the end of the day, it's better to save more lives than what is occurring without the secret deal. So before that, of course, I'll respond to a few things coming from the opening side. Now, the opening side made a few difficult decisions in regards to how they characterize the secret deal, right? First of all, there are qualms with how they didn't check convoy trucks. We think this is a very minuscule discrepancy, right? Because we think that terrorists, when they have the opportunity to save their families, when they have the opportunity to leave ISIS, the nature of ISIS, how inflammatory it is, we think a majority of them will choose to lay down their weapons anyway, especially given the opportunity. We think the fact that even if it's not in agreement with the international alliance, we don't think the international alliance would actually abandon Iraq in the first place, because Iraq represents an important utility, sit down please, represents an important utility to the fight against ISIS. We think by abandoning Iraq, that doesn't seem particularly sound, it doesn't seem particularly grounded in reality under their side. They also talked about how information from Iraqi officials would be distrusted, which is particularly contradictory, right? Because if it's a secret deal, why would they be distrusted? Why would they be seen as complicit with ISIS fighters if they can't be seen in the first place? We think that's in favor of the secrecy of the deal in the first place. Sit down, please. So a huge problem with that decentralization argument, right, is that decentralization already occurs under status quo with ISIS, except the fact that ISIS is as centralized as it is, worldwide attacks are already happening, except under their side, they're happening with coordination, they're happening with direction, they're happening with the intention of a leadership unto one. Or when we decentralize ISIS, when we decentralize these individuals, we disenchant them. You can't expect these individuals to go across the world and suddenly be intent on fighting when they've just left the war zone in the first place. These aren't individuals who want to fight anymore. They're done. They want to save their families. At very least, we can assume a majority of them do. That's why they would agree to a deal with the enemies that they were fighting in the first place. So we should. The problem under status quo isn't the people on the ground, right? It's the ideology. And in defeating the ideology, we think that West and Iraqi officials should take a different approach towards how we understand terrorism, towards how we care about these people on the ground. So before that, yes, please.
Firstly, these troops left with weapons. I need you to tell me that if they are going to be violent, would you be then okay with it? Secondly, can you characterize to me why a weak, decentralized ISIS, which is going to be invaded by the army, was something that's so strong and powerful on your side of the house?
We think that even first of all, we contend the fact that they would actually be violent in the first place after they've just been spared mercy. We can't dehumanize these people, because the moment when you dehumanize terrorists, right, is the moment you concede to terrorism, the moment you vilify them. Let's understand why these people join these organizations in the first place, right? The reason why is because of the nature of reactionary Islam. All terrorist groups are reactionary. The side opposition overestimates the coordination involved in terrorism. We believe that when it comes to terrorists, right, the reason why they join is because they want a meaning to live. They want to feel a feeling. We feel that this is particularly true under ISIS, where militant Islam holds a huge grasp on the psyche of these individuals. We feel that these people are more coerced than they are willingly joining. Even if they do join at their will, we think the West, or we think organizations, should spare them the same way that people in Western countries, for example, are highly influenced by the military-industrial conflict. They're influenced by the nature of patriotism, which is religious in a sense. The fear of the other, which empowers these individuals to react, which empowers these individuals to fight. Under both sides, we feel that occur. What about complicitness with torture, complicitness with atrocities that occurs under ISIS? We think that also occurs under other armies as well, where soldiers who join the fight for their government fight for a government which tortures an individual, fights for a government which is atrocious towards individuals. We think that the West should at very least understand as to why these people react, because of the harshities that have been imposed on them in previous years. Before that, yes please.
Your arguments are contingent on an assumption that these people are not gonna continue their contingency plan, making it split into groups, as well as what the international community should have done. Assuming that this assumption that they're not gonna be sympathizers and are actually gonna act out as splinter groups, what are you okay with that then?
We don't think your side does anything to defeat splinter groups, right? Splinter groups already exist under status quo, except the fact is the ideology that empowers splinter groups should be the primary focus. And the ideology is fueled by harsh acts of Western governments in destroying these families. Disagreeing with the secret deal is agreeing to the fact that the families of these terrorists, the families of these people who have made mistakes, who have been coerced by a religion which tells you that you'll go to hell if you don't do what's right, and what's right that has been presented to them is what's been presented by the propaganda that's been proliferated with ISIS. The powerful propaganda which garners and invokes a very huge reaction on their part. We don't think that families should suffer from them. So by disagreeing with the deal, we think you are agreeing to punishing the families because of the actions of a select few. We think by providing them mercy and at least prosecuting for their actions after that mercy, it is a better gesture. We think that gesture is important in not only defeating the people on the ground, but also defeating the ideology that powers decentralized terrorism, that powers worldwide attacks. Because the direction that people who commit terrorist acts is because of the ideology that takes over their mind. Before 6, yes please.
Sir, the ideology is literally an extreme perception of what Islam is. So can you tell me how this ideology dies out the moment somehow or other you give them mercy?
Good question. The ideology that is extremified because of Western atrocities. By at least showing the mercy, we know we can't defeat ideology straight away, but it's a gesture, it's a step in the right direction. And we think that step is especially important. We think the first step is the most important step, the most important gesture in showing them mercy. We think this form of mercy at the very least tells them that West isn't always bad, that the Iraqi government isn't always worth fighting against, that there are human beings on the ground, people who understand the value of family, people who understand the fact that these people sometimes feel like they have no choice because of the looming idea, the looming religion that goes over them, that influences them to pull the trigger. So we think we should start with the Western principle. We think this will result in less damage. We think by doing this, we are taking a step in the right direction in depriving the ideology that empowers these extremists, in depriving the anti-Western motives that empowers these people. So we think a lot of the comparisons, the examples coming out on their side are problematic. The fact that these people suddenly have, when they're decentralized, when they move out of Iraq, they suddenly have the capabilities and the resources akin to Colombian drug lords, which is a really weird comparison. So for all these reasons, we think I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank the member of opposition for that speech. Now to wrap up the case beside government, we invite the government whip. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, so today we are debating on a subject on ISIS, which is not simply a group which already done a few mistakes or small mistakes, but they already caused lots of destructions, they already murdered lots of people, they already caused lots of mass murder, and they even believe that those kind of things are holy for them, are religious for them. So today we are not talking about which action or which approach is much more better to cater them, and which is less harsher or not, because the fact that they are already that harsh, and the fact that they are really hard to contain, and we can't do any more like soft approach and so on. So moving on to my rebuttals. So coming from the side of opposition, first they say that the approach to terrorism is so aggressive on our side of our on the off house, and they say that ISIS deserves mercy. Actually, the fact that they already believe that mass murder is a sacred thing to do, they already explains that they don't reserve any merciness. That is what our house trying to prove to you today. And the fact that they already terrorists, they are already aggressive, not only to the Iraqi, not only to a continent, but also to the whole world. Sit down first. So we're telling you that the only way to stop them is to abolish them as a whole. Because of what they try to say on the side of our opposition, they try to say that we should have mercy for them, and we should let some of them release because it's less harsher and it's more effective, like they say. But we say that they don't deserve that, and secondly, that only triggers more and more destruction on the future, and that only decrease the potential to abolish them as a whole. So second, they also say that we can't abandon Iraq because Iraq is important to fight ISIS. We have to know that today Iraq is not. This is not the gesture of Iraq, and also like sit down first, and also this is like the decision of the whole world. And also they also say that there's possibilities that ISIS fighters don't want to fight anymore. You see, today, if we bomb them as a whole, then we will stop them and they will not exist anymore. But if we let some of them release, even if they are the children, even if they are the relatives or the family members that are not really involved in the ISIS, they will have that sense of they want to do revenge. They want to get revenge for their family members that are murdered. And also, it is their nature, because they already believe that murdering others, which they believe is wrong people, is something sacred, something holy to do. They will start a bigger movement, a harsher movement, and they will do lots of extreme things than they ever done before. So we say that it is better for us to abolish them as a whole. So next, they also say that they act because of the harshities that previously done by other people to them, like the Westerners and so on. So we say that, so how is it less harsh on your side when you already murder other people, but you just like let some of them being released? Because at the end of the day, the effectiveness is not really clear, because we see that on the future they might repeat the same thing. Yeah, sure.
So why is the comparative of killing off ISIS instantly more important than governments rebuilding Raqqa and like putting in their citizens? Or do you not want to kill ISIS because you're an apologist?
Thank you, ma'am. So today we see that our main concern is not about rebuilding Raqqa and so on. The first thing we want to cater is the ISIS itself. We know that rebuilding Raqqa is an important thing to do, but the first thing that we need to make sure is that when we already do the bombings, we already like abolish the ISIS, we should think that it is worth it. How is it worth it if we already like destroy Raqqa and then rebuild it, but at the end of the day we will find a new and stronger ISIS, and then so we have to destroy another Raqqa? No. So we say that it's better for us to really destroy it as a whole and then rebuild Raqqa, because coming from the opening side of opposition, they say that it is the role of the Syrian, which is as the Iraqi government, to rebuild Raqqa. And they say that it is important for us to let some of the citizens remain in the city because of what? Because they are more experienced in rebuilding Raqqa. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that this is a really good argument to be brought, because we know that in rebuilding the city, it is not necessary for us to have the initial citizens, because at the end of the day, it's the government itself who will rebuild the Raqqa, and they know better on how to rebuild a city. And also, they say that it is actually easier to recapture individuals after that. How is it after that if we release some of them? We know that actually, when they are released, they will spread to the whole world. We don't know. We have no idea. First thing, we have no idea of their exact location after that. Second thing, they will spread ISIS to more areas in the part of the world. So this is actually increase the problems that we already have. And also, coming from the opposing side of opposition, they say that they want to prioritize the safety and happiness of people. Today, we are not only thinking about the happiness of the ISIS, which already caused the murder and already caused suffering to lots of areas. We are thinking about the safety of the whole world. So we say that it is actually much more important for us to think about happiness and safety of other people in the whole world. So we're saying that it is important for us to destroy the whole Raqqa without giving them such negotiations. So how is our side of closing government is better than the opening government? So today, actually, we were saying both sides are saying that how it is bad for us to let some of the remaining people uncaptured. But coming from the closing government, we already show you why is it right and why we don't have to hesitate to kill all of the people in Raqqa, because today we already show you that actually people who say that mass murder, who say that to kill other people is a holy thing, they shouldn't get any mercy. So by that, I've never been prouder to
I thank the government for that speech, and now to wrap up the case for side opposition and the debate, I invite the opposition whip. Here he is.
Here.
Test.
It's alright.
Is this alright? Mr. Speaker, exaggeration and assumption is all we have heard from both sides of government in today. All they have given us is shaky links and unsure arguments about how exactly ISIS works. Let me remind you, Mr. Speaker, that the only house in this debate that has accurately clarified to you how exactly the freedom fighters in ISIS fight is side closing opposition. Before I get into the opening house, I'll start off by rebutting points made by closing. First of all, they talk about how when you allow secret deals to happen between Iraqi officials and ISIS, this somehow justifies religion. We say that this doesn't happen. We say that when you conduct deals like this doesn't imply acknowledgement of the terrorism that they are carrying out in any way, shape, or form. Next, they talk about how and this was a huge bulk of the Whips case, right? About how since they've done awful things to us in the past, we should spare them no mercy. We say that if that is exactly this type of dogmatic behavior, right? An eye for an eye, this type of attitude that has caused the never-ending cycle of chaos in the Middle East that continues to perpetuate to this day. We say, let's not stoop to the levels of the terrorists and claim that all of them should be punished. All of them should be punished without a second thought. Next, we argue that the claim that these terrorists will immediately rise up again and rebel is a shaky one. This is because, first of all, when they agree to peace talks like this, there's a high chance that they're already demoralized to begin with. They have a lesser chance of rising up and rebelling like they used to. If they were rational enough, and these are rational individuals we're talking about, and we think that Side government has painted them unfairly. We say that what Side government is doing here is painting them as a strict dichotomy between good and bad. We say that they may be misguided, they may be misled. Sure, they've done atrocious war crimes, but let's think about the parallels that exist in our world, for example. Even when American soldiers commit war crimes, when soldiers from the West and from any country who come to commit war crimes, they are allowed due process, they are allowed trial. We say that bombing them directly, just to wipe all them out, like stated by the government, is not an efficient method of achieving diplomacy in the first place. Next, they assume that the only way to wipe out all of ISIS is by bombing them straight away. No, it's by bombing them straight away. We say the terrorists don't breed. What they do is recruit. What's far more likely to happen when you bomb the entire city is that more people look at the atrocities committed by the West. More people think, hey, wait a minute, why don't I join ISIS now? Why don't I start my own terrorist organization and fight back for the awful things they do to these people? Because the only side today that shows you how exactly we can end the endless cycle that's going on right now is side closing government. The only side that has shown to you how exactly these terrorists operate is not closing government, closing opposition, right? Next, we tell you that the reasoning behind the entire closing government's case is extremely flawed. They say just because we bombed them in the past, just because we committed atrocities in the past, we should not let them go. This is exactly the type of attitude that ensures things will never change in the Middle East. Oh sure, we attacked them a long time ago, we've committed atrocities behind them, and for this reason, we shouldn't let them go now. We say that if we don't change, we can never achieve any possibility of having peace talks. We can never truly dismantle the ideology, dismantle the ideology that feeds into these terrorist organizations. Now, my member told you about how utilitarianism is the only way forward in this way, and how our approach is the only approach that saves the most lives, whether they be civilian lives or whether they be civilian lives and terrorist lives as well, given that these people might be misguided. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, firstly, if they were so misguided, why couldn't they have just surrendered to the UN instead of going for a secret deal? But secondly, both you and your opening have been extremely convenient. Tell me why a weak and centralized ISIS that would have died out and restructuring could have occurred with the international support is better than your die-fractured community and a die-fractured international community.
Okay, sure. You love talking about centralization. First of all, ISIS' strength lies in the fact that they are centralized. When you dismantle their centralization, you are essentially weakening them. Second point, the fact that we are carrying these troops out is very different from a scenario in which they intentionally disperse to form their own splinter groups. This is a very different scenario than what is happening. Secondly, when they're decentralized in the first place, you talk about how these splinter factions become anthills, and these are the anthills that are more easily defeated that we talk about. I'm not taking anymore that we talk about in the first place, right? Because their strength comes from the fact that they have strongholds. Their strength comes from the fact that they are easily fortified from a central position within Iraq, within Syria, wherever they are. It is when you split them up, and this is taking them in the best case. Keep in mind that they have made a number of assumptions. I told you I'm not taking anymore. They're making a number of assumptions when it comes to how these terrorists will act after they are captured. First of all, they make the assumption that these terrorists can never be captured again, and this is a line I'm directly quoting from the Deputy Prime Minister. They told you that these terrorists can't be captured again, and they make the analogy of Colombian drug lords, right? Here's where the analogy is extremely flawed. First of all, Colombian drug lords aren't the same as soldiers fighting in the Middle East. Colombian drug lords have businesses to handle. Second of all, soldiers in the Middle East aren't billionaires soldiers in the Middle East aren't billionaires that have every whim and fancy at their disposal to get away with this. And even when we take that analogy as factual, Colombian drug lords are eventually caught anyway. So they're making the assumption that they can't be caught in the first place, right? Next, they talk about how a secret deal lets ISIS live on. No, they talk about how a secret deal lets ISIS live on. My member already explained to you today how we're here to attack the ideology, not the people. If these people have agreed to a deal, which in our scenario lessens the total amount of casualties, right? Which in our world enables more civilians to get away unhurt, enables more people to be spared. We say that this is justified. We say that this is justified. We say that this saves more lives in the long run. Next, he said that they talk about how when we were just about, here's a quote, we were just about to win the war, why let them get away? It's exactly this kind of thinking, once again, all this dogma that perpetuates the cycle of the West attacking the Middle East rising up again, forming more splinter groups, and the war inevitably continues. We say that it's only when we change our attitudes towards the Middle East that the endless cycle of propagation can be defeated. lastly, about their assumptions for how these soldiers will act, right? First of all, we say that the assumption they made that we can never ever negotiate with terrorists was mentioned once. This was mentioned once by the Prime Minister and never backed up again by any member of the government of law. They mentioned it once and just left it hanging at that. We say that they haven't provided us with any reason as to why negotiating with terrorists, dismantling their ideology, creating a world in which understanding is better off, will result in a world with fewer casualties in the long run. We say that under their world, the only thing that's going to happen is extreme short-sightedness. They don't look at the long term of how political groups like this rise up in the Middle East in the first place. We say that on our side, more lives are saved in the long run. For all those reasons, extremely proud to oppose.
Thank everybody for that debate. Please cross the floor, shake hands. The judges will go and deliberate in the tavern.